Welcome to week 3. Yep. And time's a flying. Actually, February is flying. It's already February 2nd. So if you haven't noticed, we turned into another month. And we have earthquakes today. So very exciting and new. So hopefully the earthquakes are gone for the rest of the day, but we'll see. All right, so today we're going to talk about interprocess communication, short for IPC, and I'm also going to talk about assignment number 2. But before I do that, I want to go back to assignment number 1 just to say a few things. I know I put up a video for you guys to watch to go over the assignment, but just some highlights for some pointers here. For assignment number 1, you are creating your own shell program, your own called Tish, and you're doing it in C, not in any other programming language. And all the other assignments for this class, you can do in any language you want. It's just the first one that you need to do in C. So you are creating foreground and background processes in the shell. The foreground is going to run the same as the background because you can't really put a background thread into a foreground process thread group because of just the logistics of the way things work. So if you have a background thread, it's generally put into another thread group, another hierarchy that's at a different priority for the scheduler. And that's generally done through the operating system itself. For your Tish program, when you put something in the background, it's probably not going to go in the background. You have to sort of pretend that it's going to go in the background. But you can keep track of it as if it were in the background. So when it comes to those external commands, it should be able to run almost anything. But if it works with like a hello world or an ls command or something of that nature, that works as well. You don't necessarily need to test it with everything out there, although theoretically it will run almost any external command, especially if you're doing the execv on it. For the internal commands, those are the ones that are recognized by the shell, so such as bye, or end is going to run an exit. You're going to get a internal command to show you what the jobs are. In fact, there's a list of them here, list of internal commands. So you can go by jobs, kill. Kill could actually run a signal. I believe in the coming weeks, I'm going to be talking about signals. Maybe not next week, maybe the week after. But essentially, you could put the kill, actually it's called kill, system call to terminate the process, or you could simply exit out of the process. So it's completely up to you in terms of how you want to implement that. The word jobs can run PS as well. PS is the process. So, and just to reiterate the point, what you're making is one of these. You're making a shell. So if you typed in ls in your shell, it should theoretically run ls, run the command for you. If you typed in PS or jobs, it should show you the jobs. So jobs can run PS. So once you figure out how to use the exec, you can load all of the internal commands and run them that way. So don't reinvent the wheel. Use the pieces that you have available to you. Don't make it harder than it really is. I know it's easier said than done. But questions about assignment number 1. Assignment number 1 is not due till February 15th. It's a while from now. February 22nd, we have assignment number 2. Take a look here. And I really want to talk about assignment number 2. You could do them out of order. You don't like number 1, you can wait with it. But it is just definitely a systems shell. It is from systems programming, so it might look familiar to you if you've done any systems work before. So I'm going to move right along to assignment number 2. So assignment number 2, unless somebody has any questions on number 1, it's about interprocess communication. So we're going to have threads or processes talking to each other to accomplish a task. And we're going to have more than one thread being used to accomplish a task. And it's going to be based on this model called the producer-consumer. So you're going to create a console-based application. Well, that's just a DOS, a terminal application. that spawns, aka creates, forks, two threads. Now keep in mind for this particular assignment, you can do any programming language that you want. The first one must be done in C. The second one can be done, I would actually do Java for the second one. Because Java does a much better job with concurrently running threads than C++ does, or C. Actually, I wouldn't use C++ for anything, but than C if you compare them. So we have this thing called a producer consumer that I'm going to talk about today. The producer, just like it sounds, is going to produce something. So it's going to open up an input file and repetitively copy the values to a circular buffer. Now, don't get too hung up with the circular buffer, just a buffer. So it needs to be put into a buffer. It doesn't have to be circular. It could be a fixed size buffer. It could be having a start and an end, a head and a tail. It could be a list. It could be anything you want it to be. Ideally a circular buffer, but you don't necessarily need to do that. So the consumer should open up an output file and repetitively copy the values from the circular buffer to the file. So what we're trying to do is copy a file from point A to point B. And in copying a file, we're going to have a thread for the producer, a thread for the consumer, and they're both going to run at the same time. So the producer thread is going to open up the file, copy some into the buffer. And same time, while this is going on, the consumer is going to go to the buffer and copy it down to the file. So you have both of them running at the same time. If one of them is running right after the other one, this one's stopping and this one's starting, this one's stopping, this very inefficient. It would be better just to have one thread do the whole thing. But if you're going to have more than one thread, it's better to have them working in parallel at the same time. The Java JVM will allow you to do that. The C environment, you're going to have to use mutexes and semaphores, and you have to stop one thread, start the other, stop one thread, start the other. It's not necessarily going to be the best solution. So that's why I recommend using Java for this. So the consumer should open up the file, copy the files out. Both the producer and the consumer should use a random number of bytes between 1 and n inclusively, and should be copied each iteration, where n is specified by the user and the number of bytes should be randomized for each iteration. Forget about all that too. Put some randomization in there. So if what you don't want to have happen is producer takes 5, put it in, takes 5, put it in, takes 5, put it in. Consumer takes 5, pull it out, take 5, pull it out. The same number. I guess you could, but to make it more interesting, you could have a random number that the producer's putting in and a random number that the consumer's pulling out. Might make it more interesting. Well, what's going to be interesting is your output, I guess. So on the screen, you'll say, producers putting in 15 items into the buffer, consumers pulling out 10 of those items. So that's, okay. Because theoretically, we aren't humans. If we were humans doing this, we're not perfect, nor are we exact. Are we really going to load up 5 at a time, or are we going to take 6 or 7 occasionally, or 4? So for both the producer and the consumer, we get that random number going on. If the producer is unable to write to the buffer, why would that happen? Well, the buffer might be full. Let's say the producer wrote the entire file out already. The file might be empty. It might not have anything left to take. So you got to keep track. Is the buffer full? Is it empty? And what's going on? So maybe because the producer is unable to write because it doesn't have enough empty elements in the buffer. Or if the consumer is unable to read from the buffer because maybe it doesn't have enough items to read. Maybe the consumer is trying to consume, but the buffer's empty. So if the buffer's empty, then the producer's got to work. If the producer's too much, then the consumer's got to work more. So we can do a little bit of a trade-off back and forth and make one of them work harder than the other to fix these little problems that come up. So an exception might be once the producer has already read the entire file, there's nothing left to read, then the consumer doesn't have to continue generating random numbers. It can just write out the rest of it. Instead, it should just write out the rest of it. So when the program completes, the output file should be an exact copy of the input file. The context, the syntax of the program should look like this is the name of the file you're creating, the name of the input, and the name of the output, and an M. If you want to do it this way, you could just do a copy. I don't call it CP because then you're going to have a problem with the copy command that's actually on your operating system called CP. So maybe call it copy file or CPP or something. I don't know. So change the name a little bit. Otherwise, you're going to have a little confusion going on there. Now, the input file name, the output file name can include the path if you want. Doesn't have to include the path, but these two parameters are kind of necessary. The N and the M may not necessarily be necessary. They stand for the N is the maximum number of bytes to copy in a given iteration, and M is the size of the circular buffer. So we can say 50 maybe bytes, and the size of the circular buffer, let's say it's 200 megabytes or something. So if you don't want to do it, don't do it. Hard set it. If you want to hard set it, that's fine. Otherwise, this is allowing the user to set it. When it comes to little insignificant detail, I call it an insignificant detail like this. Don't be too exact. I have a couple breeds of students. One in particular category is going to be reading this over and over and over again, and they're going to do it exactly like it's read, like it's there. And that person's going to get the same number of points as somebody else who looks at this. If I were doing this, I would just go, okay, I'm going to do it my way. And let's say I don't want to type all this stuff out every time. I'm just going to hard set the buffer. I'm going to take M and hard set it in there, circular buffer. I'm going to make it 200 megabytes. It's always going to be that way. And I don't want to specify it on the command line, then don't do it. You have to, though, create some sort of a bounded buffer. So if you're doing that in the code, do you really need to ask the user for it? If you don't want to, you don't have to. Or the randomness. I would do the randomness. Can you hard set it? Yeah. You don't necessarily have to put it in. So if using command line arguments is giving you problems and you can't figure out how to do it, then don't do it. When you turn it in for grading, if I don't like it, I'll let you know. You can also send me an email message with it before you actually even turn it in for grading. And say, here's my program. I didn't want to I hard set the buffer size. I didn't ask for the input from the user. And I didn't use any randomness. Instead, I have everything fixed at 5 bytes each. And then I'll look at it and go, okay, you've accomplished the task. Those are what I call insignificant details. How big the randomness is, how big the buffer. The buffer in the real world, not that Unix is the real world, but when they develop the CP command, they benchmark it. So when you type in CP and you type in the name of the file and you type in the output location, like copy this file from here to there, first thing it'll do is it'll read the file, kind of take a look at the file and go, oh, wow, that thing is 2 gigs. If I have a 2 gig file, I'm going to have a different size buffer than if I have a 200 megabyte file. So it'll look at the size of that and it'll create the buffer size accordingly, which is technically what this was supposed to do here, to create the buffer size accordingly. But you could benchmark it yourself, or you can have a fixed buffer size. You don't have to benchmark it for the size of the file, and just assume all your files are copying are 200 megabytes or something. But in the real world, yeah, the bigger the buffer is needed, you need a bigger buffer to copy a bigger file. That's just the reality of it. If you use a big buffer for an itsy bitsy little file, it's overkill and it's a waste of resources. Now, even though it's put back into the memory pool at the end, it doesn't, it makes the program run a little bit slower. So simple copy command copies from point A to point B. Questions about assignment number 2. I'm going to stop this recording because it's, oops. Was I recording at all? Oh, yeah, I was recording. Okay. It's Monday.